Hi, my name is Lyric, and today we're going to be continuing the Greatest Peak series by the Great Thinking Basketball. One of the best NBA YouTubers does great analysis, and so now we're just on to, we've gone past the main big, GOAT candidates and stuff, so now we're just going to start binging the series a bit with the last remaining ones, and we're starting with Bill Walton, episode 2. Bill Walton's passing and defense was insane. Bill Walton is one of the most underrated players in NBA history. He won an MVP and a championship, and yet people still don't call him the Blazers' all-time player when no other Blazer has won an MVP or a championship or a Finals MVP. So I don't know I don't understand why he is not the best Blazer of all time in people's opinion. But yeah, let's go. Let's go. Greatest Peak series.
There's a mythology about Bill Walton that few players can match. Blazer mania, that fiery mountain man beard, and countless injuries that ended his prime as
so many injuries. Insane.
His first 2 seasons were shortened by an assortment of ailments before a brief 2-year stretch in 1977 and 1978.
He only had, that 1 2-year stretch was really the only we saw him playing Bill Walton, but he is so much in it.
An NBA championship and an MVP trophy. So, just how good were those 2 seasons? Was that brief peak enough to compete with the most dominant centers in NBA history?
Very brief peak.
Was he the greatest passing big man of all time?
Well, not all the time now, This guy named Nikola Jokic, but I haven't seen the series in a minute, bro. I'm glad to see this intro right here.
This series tackles one question. Who was the best at his best? We start at the ABA merger and go through the best multi-year stretches, examining the legends who provided the most on-court impact. These are the greatest peaks.
I'm excited, man. Let's go. Greatest Peaks, episode 2, Bill Walton, 1977 to 78.
Before we can estimate Walton's impact, it's important to understand the way the game was played before the three-point line. With so many shots funneled into the paint and no extra point for stretching out the court, defensive big men were titans back then. The definitive basketball archetype wasn't a high-flying scoring guard, but a dominant center. And no, not Wilt Chamberlain, but his rival, Bill Russell. Russell's defense
was better than Chamberlain
over the prior decade,
all time,
where he won 5 MVPs
I'd say,
without being a heavy scorer on offense. That's worth repeating. Wilt Chamberlain once averaged 50 points per game in a season, but the zeitgeist of the time was to play like Russell. In 1967, after years of volume scoring, Chamberlain's own coach asked him to play like Russell, shoot less, pass more, protect the paint. And this led to a new record for wins and an end to the Celtics' 8 consecutive title streak. The search for the next Russell peaked in 1969 when Wes Unseld won the MVP by playing a team-centric pass, rebound, and defend role that Russell was glorified for playing. And that's exactly how Walton played, only with greater scoring skill than either Unseld or
Kareem.
Russell. As a sophomore in college, he was compared to both Russ and Chamberlain, and is a junior.
His college career was insane.
The greatest single-game performance in
absolutely
NCAA
insane. That
history,
shooting form, though,
going 21 of 22 from the floor, en route to 44 points.
That's insane.
60th win
Absolutely
in
insane.
60 college games up until that point.
Bill Walton has a case with Kareem and Pete Maravich and stuff like that as the greatest college player of all time. Like, oh my god.
The grainy signs of his offensive repertoire were on display. The bank shot, his activity, dexterity, and of course, the passing. Like most players, Walton probably peaked as a passer later in his career, especially with slightly more space to work with in the 1980s. Back in 77 and 78, at the height of his overall powers, his passing was defined by hitting swirling cutters from the mid and high post area. Some of these were like water polo passes, just flipping the ball over heads in really tight quarters.
A Jokic type beat right here.
The characteristic of these passes was speed and accuracy. Older centers could occasionally throw flashier passes than Walton from these cornerstone spots, but Walton's volume and efficiency was
Wilt Chamberlain also up there
that point in time.
One of the greatest passing big men. Look at this.
Create a better delivery angle over the top. Portland's half-court game was largely built off cutters buzzing around Walton like this. He has multiple options here if there's any opening, and his speed-accuracy combination resembles a modern quarterback throwing tight short yardage completions. Today we might just see a crowded lane where everyone's covered, but Walton sees a pass behind the hoop, the only window to thread this needle.
Wow, that's a great vision right
Compare
there.
that to another Blazer big, Lloyd Neal, who misses a Walton special here, only to have Big Red show him how it's done. Walton's vision stems from reading the game so well at the team level, knowing who's supposed to go where and what options are available. With the overplay on the pass, he leads the cutter into space, and again, what accuracy on the release.
That was great. That was
Walton's
great.
also known for his outlet passing, and he mostly flung these toward the mid-court after ripping down a rebound. It was almost like a single motion, grabbing and firing to start Portland's vaunted fast break.
Kevin
But
Love
he wasn't
type beat.
throwing touchdowns on these like some of the other great outlet passers of that era already were, and in the limited game footage in public, the one he tried got away from him a bit. His more notable weakness to me is passing on the move. His handle wasn't really functional, and that meant that his half-court passing was largely stationary, limited to whatever outpost he caught the ball from. Of course, most big men at the time couldn't pass on the move, nor was the game conducive to them running pick and roll, so relative
though.
to his
That was great.
time, Walton was certainly among the
underrated
best
player,
passing
MVP.
bigs to come along, and perhaps the best ever at finding cutters. All of Walton's missed games from injury give us insight into his value for Portland. In games where Walton was the only missing rotational player, Portland assisted on 54% of its field goals in 1977 and 1978. Add Walton in, and that number jumped to nearly 58%. His outlet passing had a similar effect on pace. With Walton, the Blazers played at a slightly above average pace for the time, and without him, they averaged 4 fewer possessions a game, which would have made them one of the slower teams in the league. The total effect on offense was that the Blazers were 3.7 points better than average with him, but only 1.2 points better without
The
him.
thing is, these are all offensive stats. I also know that Bill Walton was also an all-time great defensive player, so it really shows you how great his peak was and how the missed potential could have been. Because look at how greatly he's improving his team on offense, but also I think we're gonna get into how much he would improve, how much he would help his team on defense as well.
Yeah. That is still a solid offense without Big Bill, largely because his replacements were good scorers. Tom Owens averaged 19 points per game and 4 assists in 1979. And the aforementioned Lloyd Neal was a good scorer too. Walton was a similar scorer to those two, at least statistically, going to that jump hook as a bread and butter move.
It's a
He
weird
had a nice
shot
touch
though.
on this, and while it certainly wasn't the sky hook, that's for the next episode, Bill could release
Watch
this
that one.
cleanly most of the time without too much of a setup. It was a back to the basket move, but it was also used at the end of a little face-up like this when headed right. He could also knock down mid-range jumpers, preferring to go glass on these whenever possible.
Ooh.
Big Red could walk into these,
Ugly
but
bank,
also
but it
liked
worked.
a turnaround after a single dribble. His range on these jumpers was maybe out to 17 or 18 feet, probably limited by that funky form that kept
Pretty
his
good
free
for a
throw
center
shooting
at the
around
time, though.
70% at
Yeah,
his
that's a weird form. Definitely a weird
His
form.
scoring moves were decisive like this, but he didn't possess an overwhelming scoring arsenal. Adjusted for inflation to 2020 numbers, Walton averaged about 20 to 21 points per 75 possessions during this 2-year peak, and his scoring efficiency was 4 to 5 percentage points ahead of the league. Interestingly, his scoring did slide a touch in his 19 playoff games, averaging closer to 17 points per 75 when adjusting for inflation, with slightly lower efficiency than in the regular season. During that 77 playoff run,
It was
Walton
hard to win a
the
championship,
second
though.
leading scorer on the team, but only the 4th leading scorer when adjusting for pace, a testament to Portland's balanced attack built off of Walton's passing. But the Blazers weren't a dominant playoff offense, in part because of Bill's shortcoming as a scorer. He also added value with his activity, first as a cutter, knowing when to read this opening for a dive cut and lob, This kind of off-ball play adds value around higher-end talent, and it led to this vintage Blazer Mania sequence in the 1977 finals against
Oh yeah, this is
Philadelphia.
an iconic play right here. This.
Walton was always
I've seen that
looking
iconic
for
sequence
little
before,
soft
yeah.
spots in the defense, finding offensive rebounding opportunities and high percentage second chance points that cleaned up for his teammates.
Great rebound.
He wasn't a skywalker, but his size and quick leaping allowed him to finish plays around the rim and score off of rebounds like this, boosting his scoring numbers a bit in the process with these high percentage follow-ups. By the way, Walton was huge. His height is debated, but he wasn't much smaller than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who stood
Damn.
7'2" without shoes, and here he is next to Robert Parrish, listed at 7'1", and Kevin McHale, listed at 6'10".
Yeah,
That
well over 7
size
foot.
contributed to his crippling
Well over
injuries,
7 foot.
as his feet weren't anatomically
Yeah.
capable of supporting his big.
That's why I'm so worried for Wemby. Victor Wembanyama, man. That's why I'm so worried for him. He's like 7'5".
And the shock of all that running and jumping. Walton missed 3 full seasons before ramping his career back up in 1983 in San Diego. Again, he's not dwarfed by Kareem here at all, but boy did that size and mobility help him protect the paint. Walton's massive impact on the game, his very inclusion in this series, is primarily because of his defensive value.
Well, he's insane because we were talking about his offense the entire time.
Most 7-footers aren't super active and able to read the game, but back before the three-point line, this was arguably the most valuable trait in the entire sport. We'll see why in a moment.
Filming birds of prey is not for those who have a fear of heights. I graduated from the practice tree to the 200-foot monster. Bring her up. Beautiful. To fly and hold the eagle was a landmark of my life.
Walton was a classic paint protector, and because of the rules back then, he almost served like a goaltender, patrolling the area in front of the hoop and challenging all comers. The dangerous Doug Collins runs into a wall here, or I guess a Walton. There's a good joke in there somewhere.
Great pun. Great pun.
But Bill was always really well positioned. He sagged off players without the ball in textbook fashion, but was ready to pounce in these spots. He was one of the most active big defenders in league history, helping when needed or stepping out and challenging shots
Over
from
Pistol
mid-range,
Pete.
ambushing Pete Maravich here, who thought he was
Yeah.
clear. You'll notice his hands are always out, clogging passing lanes so teams don't sneak those dimes through to cutters like the Blazers did, and his hands were active targeting the ball, here deflecting this jump pass. Like great rim protectors, he was accurate jabbing at the basketball, and he would pull his hand away to avoid fouling at times. Bill's quick bunny hop couldn't get him over the top of the square like some of the great modern shot blockers, and this meant that occasionally strong athletes or crafty finishers could slip one through. Here he slides down in position, but mistimes his jump, and that throws off the contest a bit, but his typical reactions were quick, and with sound position, he
If you're like
bodied
7'2", though, if someone's getting a shot over you, bro, good look for them, bro. Like, there's no way you're gonna stop it. If you're a jumping 7'2" dude, like, you know,
many shot.
yeah, they're still shooting over you. Fair play.
He wasn't a stiff either, comfortably chasing wings outside the paint to harass their
Okay.
jumpers. Remember, back
Versatility
then,
right
bigs
there.
couldn't really be exposed on an island against quicker players because they didn't have to chase out to the three-point line.
Yeah.
The game in those days was built more around the post-up, with offenses running through the center. Unlike Walton, most high-end big men were looking to score more than pass, and that created even more defensive responsibility for the bigs of that era. In the 1977 Western Conference Finals, Walton famously battled Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for 4 games, trying his best to sit on Kareem's lethal skyhook
Beating Kareem.
and force him left, with mixed results. That's better than most against Jabbar.
Yeah, it's
and
Kareem,
Walton's size
so,
and
you know, not gonna
acumen
stop him.
helped slow Kareem a bit compared to normal centers. Here he tracks him well without the ball, happily forcing Jabbar left, but sometimes there's no stopping Kareem. Walton also stayed active, working for better defensive position, here leading to a steal, and against more mortal figures, his man defense was highly effective, banging and then going vertical against Darryl Dawkins in the '77 finals. Squint a bit and you'll see Hall of Famer Dan Issel, more of a shooting center,
Squint a bit,
get
yeah.
stuffed by Walton on this jumper, and
Was
Bill
recorded with
always
a damn
using his
toenail.
size and positioning to defend opponents like this. He was the original big fundamental, taking a textbook approach to activity, positioning, vertical contests, and so on. We can see the effect his man defense had on opponents during this 1977 and 78 stretch by looking at the 48 games he played against other All-Star centers. For instance, Kareem averaged 25.9 points per 36 minutes on 61% true shooting against everyone else.
That's
but
insane.
In 8 games against Walton, averaged 24.5 on
Yeah.
57% true shooting.
What I say, bro, Walton, bro, severely underrated, bro. Like, how do you, like, you're like premier offensive player on the team, and you're also one of the greatest defenders. It's showing like he's been the greatest defenders in history with the stats right here. I mean, slowing down literally Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, that's pretty damn good. Pretty damn good, can't lie. Yeah, it's just that his prime was so short. It's one of the most unfortunate injuries of all time. He could have been like a legitimately like top 10 player of all time if he didn't just destroy his feet, bro. Like his feet got demolished.
If we do
Luckily, he had that little bit of a comeback. Won Sixth Man of the Year, won a championship with the Celtics, '86.
this
But
for the other 7 All-Star centers
wow,
during these
McAdoo,
years,
bro.
only Big Bob Lanier and another southpaw, Dave Cowens, avoid a pretty clear drop-off against Walton. Now, team factors influence data
Moses
like
too.
this,
God
but
damn.
numbers like these crystallize the effect of a superstar defender.
Hardest?
In total, these
Damn,
All-Stars
bro.
scored
Oh my
nearly
God.
2 fewer points per 36 on 4% worse true shooting against Walton, an effect that compares favorably to all but the all-time great post defenders. In many ways, Portland was
Very
built
nice.
around Walton on both ends. Their
Yeah.
guards could be more aggressive pressuring the ball with Big Bill behind them, while Portland didn't need another paint protector out there to take away from its speed and skill game on offense. If we go back to those games Walton missed, we can see how insanely valuable his defense was. The Blazers gave up about 103 points per 100 in the 26 games with just Walton missing, but only 95.6 with him in the lineup, a jump from the third worst defense in the league to the very best defense in the league.
That's nuts.
This is
That's
likely
actually insane.
beyond the offensive impact of any player in the first 30 years of the league, perhaps save for
Wow.
Oscar Robertson or Jerry West. Overall, the Blazers were actually outscored in those 2 seasons without Walton. They had a negative adjusted point differential equivalent to a 37-win team.
Bill Walton, Jokic with defense.
64-win pace.
Oh, sorry.
But with him, they had a plus 8.5 point differential, a 64-win pace.
That's
Among players
insane
to miss
difference.
at least 20 games over a single or multi-year period, that nearly 10-point increase with Walton is the second largest in the first 70 years of the NBA.
Wow.
And that came in an era of parity where winning 55 games was rare. Only Nate Thurmond, another defensive stud,
Damn,
was
Nate.
associated with a larger increase, but his team
That makes it really
was
underrated.
far worse than those Blazers, who went a stunning
Ah.
87 and 28 in those games with Big Bill and just 10 and 16 without him. Again, most of that value was defensive, so fittingly it was the Blazers' defense that shined in 19 playoff games, holding opponents nearly 5.5 points below their regular season scoring efficiencies. In those 2 seasons, Walton and company also played 8 games without their only other All-Star, Maurice Lucas, and in those 8 games, the Blazers went 8-0. These indicators, with players moving in and out of the lineup, do still have some noise. We can't say for certain Walton was worth 9.5 points, but 26 games is enough to know that he was likely worth at least, say, 6 points to those Blazers. And that's an historically huge number. Combine that with other factors like Lucas's missed time, the playoff performance, and what we can see on film, and it's clear Walton was the linchpin of a budding dynasty.
Ooh, poster
In
on Kareem.
1979, with Michael Thompson, Clay's dad, replacing
Yeah,
Walton
Clay's
in the
dad.
starting lineup,
Number 1 overall
and some
pick.
minor bench changes, the Blazers reverted back to playing just over 500 basketball, reinforcing Bill's massive impact. I think it's fair to look at their team construction and think that there isn't another center in league history who could have maximized that fit as well as the big redhead.
Wow.
Our
Duncan and
best
Irving
impact
there.
metrics that reach back in time view Walton as having, say, a top 40 peak in playoff history. His 2-year regular season numbers were similar, by the way. And these metrics respect his defense, likely reflecting how excellent his fit in Portland was. But even in a less optimal situation, they still suggest that he belongs in this kind of conversation. And given how well his defense and his passing would travel to other teams,
All-time mid-post passer to cutters, solid but not great post scorer, short mid-range shooter, active lob threat and rim finisher, good offensive rebounder, defense, elite paint protector, super active and aware, handling threats, strong post defender, uses length and positioning well, can switch out to mid-range in spots against wings.
I don't think there are 10
Pretty good
centers
analysis.
in NBA history who peaked higher than Bill Walton.
I'd agree with that. After looking at all that, I definitely would agree with that. So yeah, that was episode 2 of Greatest Peaks. Bill Walton passing and defense. So we'll continue on the Greatest Peaks series. Yeah, I think we got a couple more to go, and then we'll look at his top 10, and I'll probably give my top 10 a video at some point. So yeah, bye.